I know this is going on YouTube, but like a lot of the school shooters are 11s. Like if you look, a lot of them, just look up their birthdays. A lot of them have 11 energy. Even the Trump shooter had 11 energy.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's kind of crazy, but like people, if you don't use your energies in a positive way, if you let it control you, then it won't be good.
The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Podcast, a podcast centered around the pursuit of truth and personal renaissance. I'm your host, Zach Shankin. Today, I'm joined by Chris Sutter. Chris is a creative entrepreneur and numerology wizard. Chris has traveled the world while building businesses online and shares interests in the areas of entrepreneurship, spirituality, lifestyle design, and more. I'm excited to get into Chris, his story, as well as my personal astrology chart reading, which we'll get into and dive into on this podcast. Chris, welcome to the show, bro.
What's up, man? Glad to be here.
Appreciate you taking the time out, but also hosting me here on your home turf. It's been almost a full calendar year since we got introduced. We'll give a quick shout out to the boy Talon.
Yeah, Talon.
For connecting us. Obviously, we have a little bit of mutuals online, and I knew from that initial call, it ended up going like 2 hours or something like that. I think I was on a long walk, and super intentional guy, cares a lot about what he's working on. And, we've remained in contact remotely throughout the year since we got connected, but it's good to like finally meet in person, and super excited to get into and allow you to showcase some of your skills, because you know a lot about a lot. And I think it'll be a fruitful conversation today.
Thanks, man. That was a very very nice intro. I was blushing a little bit when you were saying all that, but
yeah, I'm not trying to glaze, but it's I think it's important to give people their shine. Listeners of the show will know that I try to always like give a very generous introduction to my guests, not only because I genuinely believe what I'm saying, but also I think people just don't get enough kind of positive praise, especially men. Like, just not getting their 100%, shine.
Dude. I appreciate it. It's actually really funny because it was easy for you to come and meet me in person because we grew up in the same area, just probably 20, 30 miles away from each other. Didn't really know. But yeah, it was cool to connect with you and figure out you were literally from like 20 minutes down the road. So it worked out.
Yeah. Similar case to another friend of the show, Nolan, who I'll be having on in a few episodes from now. Just crazy, like entire life paths with like so much overlap. Mm-hmm. You have no idea, but like through the advent of the internet, it can kind of like dilate space and time and then bring these people into your awareness when the time is right. But I think the best way to kick things off, obviously your social media presence right now is like relatively small. Mm-hmm. You're kind of an offline guy working behind the scenes on building offers and things of this nature. But winding back the clock, I understand a little bit about your origin story. Kind of give me and the audience as well an understanding of what they need to know about you to understand who you are today.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I think gave me somewhat of an advantage growing up, now that I've like reflected on it, is growing up, we moved a lot. Like, so I'm originally from the Northeast, small town outside of Buffalo, New York, super, super small area. And growing up, my parents did a good job at like hiding the fact that we were struggling for me and my sister, but we were like always moving all the time. And from that, I was able to like just get pretty decent at like new environments, how to make new friends, people, and, ended up in Georgia, which is where we are now. Had a pretty typical, like, around the age of 7 or 8, my parents finally found like some good work and, had a pretty, nothing crazy upbringing, like pretty normal, went to school and, I was pretty much an internet kid for sure, given access to a laptop at like 11, got really into I've always been kind of a tech geek. Like I used to build computers and be really into video games and stuff. I actually played on like a competitive esports team when I was like 14 for like a month. And then I was like, the practices it's insane. It's like 10-hour practices like all day. So I was like, dip my toes in that. It's funny you say like internet friends, like now it's so common that we meet people on the internet, but we were even saying before the show, like I had a lot of friends that lived all across the country, all across the world that I was talking to. And it's kind of interesting to see like now it's like pretty, maybe to like, maybe it's not normal to like a majority of people, but it's definitely way more common. So it's definitely cool to see how like things have grown. But yeah, I went to college around here, Kennesaw State. Didn't actually finish, but was in a fraternity. Just kind of like had a lot of fun. You know, I basically went to school to have fun. That was you know, I wasn't the best student, but I was always really interested in learning, just not necessarily with the school system. So I've always like been into like learning about things I'm interested in, books. Like I've always been into like kind of rabbit holes, you could say. Even when I was young, like getting down conspiracy rabbit holes. Like it's funny, my sister's birthday is 9/11, so like I've always like been interested in that. So I was like talking to my teachers about 9/11 conspiracies when I was like 13. They were like, "What are you saying?" And yeah, it was just funny. But yeah, you know, around 21, I got into like personal development more. And around 21, 22, I actually took a sales job, which was probably the best thing I could have done. It.
And this was right after leaving school?
Yeah. So I was like, school isn't my thing. I need to figure out a way to make money. I never really wanted to do the, you know, 9 to 5s. Like even like, it's very popular to say now, oh, like F the 9 to 5, but I never really wanted that anyway. Like I always felt like, even from a young age, that I was going to do something else. And the idea of commission only sales, yeah, you have no like base, which is no security, but I liked the idea of like having to go out and like earn, and also the income potential was, you know, whatever you made of it. It also gave me just the freedom. Like I haven't had a normal like job for 5 years. I'm 26. So it's been nice. Like I've kind of gotten used to like the kind of making your own schedule kind of lifestyle. And I won't ever go back to someone else telling me when I need to be certain places. But yeah, I did sales, door-to-door sales specifically for 4 years. Ended up doing, you know, all the things like co-management, management, recruiting, you know, traveled all over the country, doing like working, and learned a ton from that. If I could recommend anyone on this listening to this who's young and is kind of lost, doesn't know what I want to do, but is more entrepreneurial, I think getting a sales job is one of the best things you can do, especially door-to-door sales. It's like really sucky, but it teaches you a ton about resilience and overcoming rejection. It'll translate to other parts of your life. And if you met me before I did that and now, like I'm a completely different person. Even like it's the holidays right now, and I'm like, my grandma's like, "Oh, it's like crazy, like you're completely different." I'm like, yeah, well, I've grown. Would you have rather me be the same guy I was 5 years ago? But a lot of people are, unfortunately. But yeah, so that was a big, it was big for me, but I always kind of knew about the online money space. Like I had a drop shipping store in like 2019 that I had a buddy help me with, and didn't really go much from there. But I kind of needed, and I think a lot of guys who want to be entrepreneurs, like a lot of people are wantrepreneurs, and I definitely fell under that category for a while, where, you know, I wanted like I just basically was lacking skills, and I was like, let me just go work under a sales organization. It's very like intrapreneurial, where you still have like, it's very much like because entrepreneurship is very correlated to your self-growth compared to how much you succeed. And that's sales the same way. So I got all I needed from that. But now in the last year, I've been more entrepreneurial, like actually starting my own ventures and everything like that. So, yeah, so that's kind of like, I guess if that's, you know, good run up to now.
It's a good TLDR, and lots to like potentially go into. I'm curious along the way, especially like, it piques my interest, kind of like the rabbit holes, like the things you were exploring, like personally, like understanding, I guess, like that there's more to the world. Like I think that we choose to play the game of entrepreneurship because it's fun. It kind of captures our intellect. It gives you kind of a vehicle to push into, but still exploring things about like the universe. And I'm curious, like when numerology came into your life, because it like, again, when we get into this, like, I know how much you know, and to let the audience in, like I was messaging you ahead of time. I was like, let me know if you need me to send over birthday, time, whatever, to like set the chart up and like prepare. And you were like, no, I'll just do it off the top. So this will be cold off of the top of his head.
Let's go.
And so like, it's very impressive how much is in your head and how much you care and kind of know deeply about this stuff. So I'm curious, like when that
came along.
Yeah, like when did you discover that world?
Yeah, I'll let the boring, like typical, like money entrepreneur stuff out of the way.
No, it's good. It's good.
Let's talk about the cool stuff. Yeah, so basically, like I was saying earlier, I've always been interested in like rabbit holes, and I'm the kind of person where if you give me like a little bit of like, if I'm interested in something, like little breadcrumbs, I'll just like go down, like I'll just go crazy and read and like listen, watch videos, like listen to, like go to sleep listening to stuff. And yeah, so it was 2022, and I mean, it's not like it was Twitter, like literally, like nice. I was on Twitter, and I want to pay homage real quick to Gary Grinberg, GG33. If you guys know who that is, he's kind of gotten big the last like year or so on social media. He's going to go pretty hard next year. You'll probably see his name a lot more. But I found him on Twitter. He was relatively small. He had a decent sized Twitter presence, but he was getting kicked off Twitter all the time. But wasn't big on TikTok, and now he's got like a couple 100K on Instagram and stuff. But yeah, I found his page. And it was basically something about being an 11 life path. And I come to find out that's like what I am. And there's like this whole thing with like, oh, it's a master number and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, what is this? And I knew of like astrology, and like I knew there was some accuracy to it. I'm not going to, just to kind of preface, I won't be going too into like Western astrology. So that's like, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, all that stuff. What kind of Gary talks more about and what I learned from him was numerology specifically, and then also Earth astrology, aka Chinese astrology or Vietnamese astrology, and I'll kind of go into why it's Earth astrology. But yeah, I've figured out that based off the day I was born, there was certain things, and then through some tweets, I learned like what it meant, and it was very accurate. And then I started learning more about the other numbers and just like reverse engineering it with like my family and friends, and it was just kept being accurate. And I was like, okay, there's something to this. So I booked a reading with him. He had like students that you could pay like $100 or something, but a reading with him was like 500 at the time. Now, if you try to get a reading with him, it's like $5,000. It's like insane because he's like blown up. But yeah, I paid him $500 because I was like, I think I've always been investing in knowledge, and I saw it as an investment in knowledge. And it's funny, I actually booked the call with him and he didn't show up. And I was like, dude, what the heck? I was like ready. I had my notebook. I was like, I'm ready to go. So I DM him on Twitter. I'm like, hey, dude, we had a reading scheduled. Like, what's up? And he got back to me and he was like, oh, dude, I guess my assistant didn't send me the calendar link, but I'm busy right now. Can you talk tonight? And I was like, yeah, just call me or like whatever time. He ends up calling, send him my number. He ends up calling me on the phone, and we ended up talking on the phone for like 3 hours. And he gives me, the reading that was like the first, like probably 45 minutes, hour of our conversation. It was on point. I was like, this is like awesome. I just kept asking him questions. Like, it was cool that he gave me that much time. I guess he was just chilling. But through that, by the end of the call, I was like, he has a group called GG33. I ended up joining. He's got like different tiers of it. And from that, he gives you a bunch of information. I won't be going into some information he gives because there's a reason he gatekeeps it, but there's a lot of stuff out there that I will go into. But yeah, that's how I got into it. And then I just started like everybody I worked with. So I had a big sales team, and like I would do it with them, and I'd be like, what's your birthday? And they'd tell me their birthday, and I'd be like, from what I was learning, I'd be like, okay, like, is this like, what are you like this? Are you like this? Is this how you are? And it was literally like accurate, like 95% of the time. Environment does play a role. So sometimes maybe certain things aren't a certain way, but everything's a percentage game, right? But it just kept being on point, and things kept aligning, especially with, there's something that I really want to go into, which is like personal year cycles and what that means. But when I started learning about all these advanced stuff and going into everything, it just kept making sense. And then I was listening to, the information that he has online, but also like the stuff in his group. And I just became obsessed. And I like through just osmosis, like people around me just hearing me talk about it, I just kind of became the numerology guy, through my friend groups. And I never thought anything much of it. Just because this is just something I'm interested in. But, people started texting me like, my boys would be like, hey, I'm hanging out with this girl. Here's her birthday. Is this like should I talk to her? And I'd be like, send him a voice note and stuff. But so Arlen Moore, you're in Tribe, right?
I was not sure. I'm tangentially connected with a lot of people. I've had Arlen on the show.
So if anyone knows Arlen Moore, he's actually in 11 as well. But I joined his Tribe group in like start of 2023, and he had a mastermind going on, and I went to that, and that was kind of like my first time going to masterminds besides like sales conferences or sales organizations. It was the first time I really surrounded myself with online entrepreneurs that were like crushing it, having 7-figure businesses and all this stuff. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, obviously you want to be able to provide value to people in some capacity. Typically people try to provide value in a service, like, oh, I'm really good at ads, or I'm really good at, you know, like a sales guy, like, sure, that's valuable. But I started doing the numerology with all these people, and it's funny. So one of the guys that spoke there, his name's Colin Yerkison, if you know Colin. And he, during like, Arlen was just basically mentioned numerology because Colin was into it. And I went up to Colin, I was like, Colin, do you know? And he actually got a reading from Gary as well. So he was like all into it. So we talked about it. And then like Noemi, which is his girl, brought me to Arlen, and we were just like talking about it. And then I started doing it with everyone. And I realized in that moment, I was like, wow, this is like something of value that I can bring to these guys that are worth like a lot, that no one really knew about. So that's when it kind of was like, aha, this is kind of like my edge, I guess. Because I mean, I'm at the point now, if someone gives me their birthday, I can pretty much read them like a book. Like I said, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I got into it. It was kind of random, just like one day. We'll go into the Chinese zodiac too, but it's funny because I discovered it in I was born 1998, the year of the tiger, and I discovered this knowledge in 2022, which was the year of the tiger. And now it's kind of become such a big, you know, pretty decent big part of my life, where now like it's like I said, kind of like an edge I have in terms of the knowledge. But yeah.
I'm curious. I mean, I think it's super cool, and there seems to be kind of like an openness, like you were open to exploring it, and not either like averse to it or had already previously adopted some sort of like adverse philosophy. I'm curious, given that we were both kind of raised in similar areas, like Southeast, very Christian upbringings for a lot of us, like were you raised with any sort of religious belief set or under
kind of. We were Protestant, so, you know, if anyone doesn't know, it's like not a very like, it's not like a Catholic or anything, like super strict. Like we would go to different churches, like non-denominational churches. And, you know, growing up, we would go to church. It wasn't something I did a ton. Like I did youth group in high school, which was fun. Like it was great. I'm not like, I've always believed in God. Like I've never had like an atheist episode, you know, like some people go.
It was a big moment in like the mid 2010s.
Yeah. But something that the like learning numerology made me realize is that numbers, and I'll kind of go into what numerology is. Numbers, it's like if you were to take all the people in the world and just delete them from life, and we just left was earth and the animals and the trees and everything, numbers still exist in nature, like shapes, geometric patterns. If you know anything about sacred geometry, like the Fibonacci sequence, golden ratio, all that stuff, shapes, frequencies, numbers, it's God's language, right? It exists without, it's not like humans came along and invented numbers. We discovered numbers, right? And one of the most important people in this whole thing was Pythagoras. He was kind of seen as a god back in his day, because he was kind of one of the first people kind of discovering these things and unlocking these, you know, the secrets to the matrix, right? Or matrix in the sense of not like the system, but more like the lattice, more like our reality, right? And that really intrigued me because I was like, okay, this makes sense. Like if there was a prime creator, he would do it in a specific way, and numbers is the way that he designed it. And through that, each number has its own energy. And then depending on when you're born, because Tesla 369, the whole thing, he always said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, you got to understand frequency, energy, and vibration. I may have butchered that, but something along those lines. And I've always kind of known that, but like growing up, I would say I've just always been open-minded to other ideas. Like politically, I've always listened to both sides. I've always heard people out. I never shut a person's ideology or thought process down without at least taking it in and doing my own research and then like coming to my own conclusion. And then I'm always willing to change my mind. I think that's something a lot of people don't do, which is like they just die on a hill and it's like, this is the way it is. And I think that's okay. But I forget who said it, but there's a quote. It's like, the sign of an intelligent mind is one who can take in information and not accept it as fact, but can ponder on it. It's definitely butchered, but yeah, I've always tried to live by that way. So I guess when I came across this information, I was immediately just like curious. And then through that curiosity, I come to find out based off my birthday, I have very specific energies that align with me being interested in these topics. So like I'll kind of go in, I guess, to myself, but I'm born on the 25th, which 2025 is coming up. So got a lot of plans in the work that matters. But being born on the 25th, that adds up to 7. So anyone listening, they can just take the day they're born. So if you're born on the 12th, 15th, whatever, you can just add it together. And that is your like birth number. So like the day you're born, or like the date, not including the year and the month. And you have certain energies with that. So me being born on the 25th, I have that 7 energy, and 7 is a very spiritually in touch number. It's very intellectual. 7's like the number of the genius. 7's like intelligence, high IQ. It's also kind of a loner number, which definitely is true. Like I had friends, but I like my me time, and some people can't like operate alone. I'm very much like, if I have all what I need, I could be in a cabin in the woods for like a decade and be fine.
Nice.
But yeah, so through that, and then just starting to learn about myself, I was like, oh, it makes sense why I'm so into this, because like literally my birthday adds up. But
no, I like, there's a few things I want to go into before we go into like, how does it work, and like your path and my path. Because I think demonstrating and explaining through your birth date, my birth date, and kind of doing those readings, I guess, is a great way for somebody to understand how I guess the system works. But
yeah,
I do want to like touch back on that idea of like open-mindedness versus religiosity and dogma. I've been thinking a lot about it, and I've also been faced with it very recently. Like my last podcast before this one went out was me. One of the things for 2024 was reading the whole Bible, because I was raised Christian, never read it in its entirety, and I just wanted to see what the text had to show me without a preacher, without a priest, without an interpretation, without a study Bible. I just wanted to see. And naturally, I've also been very curious for a long, long time. So I'm doing concurrent research on ancient religions, the historicity of the text, all these other things. So
yeah,
I was pretty general in that podcast. I really didn't make any sort of strong assertions, but I definitely triggered the religious mind. Like the comments are surprisingly vitriolic underneath that podcast. Anyone can go on YouTube and see those. And I was just kind of disappointed and surprised. And I think it's a lot of the same reason a bunch of people I grew up with ended up leaving the faith, is just ultimately the behavior of the Christians. But anyway, before I go too much into the Christian worldview and like trigger that container again, I think this idea of open-mindedness, the willingness to, you know, balance those two competing ideas in your head and think about them, but not try to tie yourself. Like it's very much, it's a sign of vitality and vibrance and life, because the antithesis of life is stagnation, calcification, and death. And I think that what that manifests in ideologies are things like dogma and religion. And so like ideally, yeah, like even as much as you do believe in kind of these practices, and with astrology and whatever else, like if you were ever presented with competing information that then became more true or added some sort of layer of clarity, the ability to continue to adapt your worldview and change it, I think is the name of the game. And then additionally, what I want to add on is like the way I've tended to think about the world of astrology or numerology is that, like you alluded to, like it's baked into the lattice or the matrix of how this whole thing works. And it's less about making it a comparative, say, religion or school of belief, and more understanding how the chess game is played, like how the pieces move themselves, and then how you choose to play the game, totally up to you. But it is simply just baked in. It would be as if like you have the choice to understand how chess works, or just not learn the rules, and then when you try to move the knight sideways, you're like not allowed to, and then being frustrated. That's like how I've tried to frame it, and I think it's helpful in that way, because like you said, it's like the way God is trying to communicate to us. And that's an a-religious statement. Like you can plug into any other faith set and cosmology as you want, but this is like the rules of the game.
Well, every religion has numbers in their texts, right? Like Muslims have 33 beads on their necklace. Jesus died when he was 33. Abraham ruled for 33 years. There's a lot of
33 vertebrae on the spine.
33 vertebrae on the spine, right? So there's numbers exist across the spectrum. And I like what you were saying earlier about the antithesis thing, because like I love something that I think more people need to adopt is the idea of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So it's the idea of there's one side viewpoint, then like polar left, and then there's polar right. And then the idea is that you want to create a synthesis, not necessarily in the middle, but somewhere in the gray of like, let me just hear out everything and then come to my own synthesis of the ideas. That's like where I feel like the world would be a better place if everyone just kind of like did that. What was your question again?
Well, I nothing directly prompted. I just kind of like discussing that idea, and I'm glad you brought up like thesis, antithesis, synthesis, because I know one of the things I've gone recently into my human design, and I'm curious.
Oh, wow, it's funny. Yeah, I was just camping like a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, and one of the girls that was on the trip, she was like a yoga instructor, and she was really into human design. Gave me like a reading. Yeah,
I'm curious how much overlap and parallel. But one of the things I learned about my human design is that like one of my things is synthesis of a lot of like complex ideas and then bringing that into a digestible format for the world. So we'll see how much that overlaps.
I'm not a human design expert, so I won't.
No, and that's about all I can bring up right now.
But no, there's a lot, and I think like one of the great sayings, especially once you get into the self-help world, is just knowing thyself. And I think through these different things and being open-minded to that, because a lot of religions they'll say, oh, like astrology is satanic,
it's witchcraft.
It's witchcraft, and it's like, okay, all right, okay. First things first. It's like let's think about this. Let's get really deep in the rabbit hole real quick. If you're running the world, let's say you have all the power, right, and you understand certain knowledge, and that's what you really have to go back and look at is what people in positions of power, what do they know and what do they use? And if you look at all the people in positions of power that run the world, you know, the 13 families, I don't know if you've gone into that on previous pods, but basically they all use numerology and astrology in various ways. It's ancient knowledge. If you know anything about Freemasonry, this kind of information has been passed down for literally thousands and thousands of years. It's stuff that's ancient Mesopotamian people used to study. Atlantean, all this stuff that's been passed down for years and years and years and years. And thinking like, okay, if this information is so powerful, if it's cheat codes, right, to the matrix or a reality, I want to use it for myself. Why would I want the general public to use it? So I'm going to tell them that it's bad. I'm going to tell like everyone that this is not, this is witchcraft. Oh, you can't like look into this. This is bad, because I want to use the power for myself.
Yeah.
At least that's my viewpoint. I'm, willing to hear what you think of that. But, I don't think knowledge is inherently bad. I think the use of knowledge can be used in bad ways. But I also think understanding evil, if you want to say certain ideas are evil, or understanding good, again, having that thesis, antithesis, if you can understand the duality and come to your own conclusions and things and use knowledge in a good way, then that's what you should try to do. But I don't think learning about certain things is inherently bad. Like, I don't like the idea of like, oh, well, don't look into this practice because that's like demonic. Yeah, it's like, okay. Which is fine if someone doesn't want to do that. Now I'm just a curious guy, so like I'm just curious, but I'm never gonna use anything for evil. Knowledge can be used for evil for sure, but I don't think in it inherently of itself is evil.
I definitely agree, and I think that a few things come to mind. One is like this idea that certain things you can learn about are slippery slopes towards the occult or towards the left hand or towards demonic, like you're opening portals for entities, like you're essentially dabbling in stuff like the dark arts that is dangerous for you. I am of the opinion that while certain things may be used by those kind of parties malevolently more frequently, and they might be more associated with entities that are out there that are malevolent, I think that, like you said, the knowledge and the information itself is neutral, and for it to get to the place where it could harm you, you would have to be in the place where you're complicit in the harm. Mm-hmm. I very much am a believer of like we are co-creating reality, like a lot, like not truly hermetic, like all is mind.
Yeah.
But some sort of synthesis of that idea, right? Where like our consciousness is interplaying with whatever's going on in reality, meaning like you give these systems power.
Yeah.
You actually through your belief, which is a tool that you use, you imbue these things with power. So your focus on your life path and astrology and numerology in your life therefore gives it more energy and power in your life. Whereas if it was just not in your awareness at all, it may be operating in the background, but it's not going to be a dominant driving force, and certainly not a tool for you to use positively in your life. And then secondarily, like the laying down of like ethic, good, evil, good, bad. I think it's like complicated. I think most people don't even know what they're talking about when they say good and evil.
Yeah.
But the important thing also to return to, and this was I sought advice because like I'm a seeker as well, and I just keep clawing at the truth and going deeper and deeper. And one of my concerns was, and I asked this to Pat Moyce, a previous guest of this podcast, as well as Dustin Thomas, who you might know.
Oh, I know Dustin. Yeah.
And I just asked them both because like I respect both of them as like very knowledgeable people and like further down the line than myself in age and wisdom, etc. And I was like, how am I gonna know? Like, how am I gonna know if this was like the layer of like the fake, the psyop on top of the psyop, and this is actually the bad guys trying to tell me that it's the good guys thing?
Psyop.
and ultimately, both of them kind of terminated on like, at the end of the day, like you have to use your intuition.
Yep.
You will just kind of know internally, and that has served me tremendously. Like the more I've kind of radically detached myself with like this idea of finding the right answer, or like finding a school or a teacher that's going to be able to consistently give me the right answer, and more of like, no, I am going to be the arbiter of truth, and it exists, and I have the ability to intuit this is safe, this is not safe, this is good, this is not good, this is from God, this is not from God. And I think when you hone that ability, it only gets sharper over time. So in the world of astrology, I was raised in a position where people would say it's demonic. People would say it's of the devil, whatever. Yep. But like, I don't want to trigger the Christian mind, but like I look at that religious institution itself as more likely a control mechanism made by man, and very likely the same controlling parties that are over the world at large. And certain things we can and cannot say on YouTube, so I will diverge, or I'll choose to hold my tongue here. But I do want to circle back ultimately to astrology specifically, and I think it's probably worth going into just doing my reading and allowing my lack of knowledge to like poke in and ask questions.
Yeah, for sure. I'll set the foundation of like, okay, basically there's 12 numbers or life paths you can be, 1 through 9, and then 11, 22, and 33. And then I'm going to go into your Chinese zodiac. Now the Chinese it's just called the Chinese zodiac, but it's actually Earth astrology. So if anyone knows anything about astrology, it's like, oh, it's how Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and all these stars, it's the energy that's emitted from those celestial bodies that's then imprinted into you when you're born. So the moment you're born, that energy is imprinted into you, and that's what leads to certain personality traits. And when those energies come back around, you basically it affects you in some way. Now Chinese astrology, which we'll go into like that as well with your reading, it's Earth astrology. So it's the energies from the Earth that's imprinted into you. So from what I've seen doing my own homework is like, okay, it's more, from what I've seen, it's more accurate. Now I do think once you start getting into like your different houses and everything, Peyton Elroy.
Yeah.
So she actually gave me a reading like a couple weeks ago, and it was very great. I think, she's more of an expert in that. So if you want to get into that, look up her stuff. But I tend to see that the Chinese zodiac or the Earth astrology is definitely, which is like the animals. If anyone knows, like we're currently in the year of the dragon. There's like the year of the ox, the year of the rat, the year of the tiger, the year of the monkey, all this stuff. So yeah, we'll go into that as well.
And I would assume it is because it's simply just more local to us, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah. Mars is proximity. Far. Mars is far. Earth is close, right? All of us were born on Earth, I think. And so yeah, it's just from what I've seen that it just is more accurate. So yeah, basically when you're born, it's a certain year, and then every 12 years that energy comes back around and benefits you. That's why certain people do well. I'll just give like a example that people would know about, like Hak Tua, that girl.
Okay.
Yeah. Weird example, right? She somehow became famous this year. Well, she was born in the year 2000, and that was the year of the dragon. And right now it's 2024, which is the year of the dragon. So in the year of the dragon, under her energies, she becomes world famous. Now, she's obviously dealing with backlash of her crypto thing. If you know anything about that, if you're on Twitter, you see all that.
Also, there's like the conspiracy that she's a plant from the machine, which
yeah. Either way,
entertain.
if I'm the machine,
right,
who am I going to plant?
Yeah.
Yeah. So another example, Ice Spice, that weird artist who's like came out of nowhere last year. Well, she was born in 1999, which is the year of the cat, which I believe you were born in 99 as well.
That is correct.
And she blew up last year. There's another example of basically every 12 years when you're 12, around the age of 12, 24, 36, you that energy that you were imprinted with at birth comes back around, and that benefits you. And then on the inverse, there's what are called like enemy years, has been what, GG33 coined it as. And, basically a year that is a better time to, let's just say, like lay low and take it easy. It's not your time. Basically, it's the universe's checks and balances for, basically to ensure no one gets too powerful. But so that's kind of, I guess, laying the groundwork. But
yeah.
Let's get into you, bro.
All right. Well, Zachary Shankin was born April 18th, 1999 at 12:49 p.m. It was a Sunday.
It was a Sunday. Okay. So April 18th.
April 18th.
1999. April baby. Let's go.
April baby.
April 25th here. So
Aries.
I'll start with the day because that's the easiest to start with because it's just the 18th. So that is obviously 9. So 9 is the number of completions. 9 is the number of endings. It's also the number of death, which, I know I'm starting morbid here, but 9 is also a very intelligent sign because the word intelligent begins with I, the 9th letter. We don't have to go too into it. Maybe we can, but the English language is very encoded with numbers as well. So certain words and vowels, like there's so much energy. It's called gematria or Jewish mysticism. It's a whole nother thing. But basically with the number 9, it's also a very adaptable number. So you're the kind of person where you adapt very, very well to your environment. So like you could be put around someone. But basically 9s are like chameleons, right? So like whatever they are around, they will adapt to. So depending on what crowd you're in is very, very, very important to your success as a person. Because if you're around a bunch of people doing drugs, you're going to do drugs. If you're around a bunch of people crushing it in business, you're going to crush it in business. If you're around people who are into certain ideas, you're going to inherently attach to that. So 9s need to be very, very careful. And I'm saying 9s, but people born with 9 energy, whether you're a 9 life path or born on the 9th, 18th, 27th, need to be very, very, very particular about who they surround themselves with because they will become what they are around.
And to clarify, this is the
day you're born on.
Day that I'm born. So this is not my life path number, which would have more governing effect.
Correct. So think of it like this. I played video games. I use this terminology a lot, but your life path is basically like your highest stat. So that's like your stat that affects you the most. The day you're born is like your second highest stat, and then depending on who you ask, it's very important to your overall energy. So life path and birth number. Some people call it different names, but those are like the two.
Got it.
So what we're talking about right now is your birth number, which is 9. So 9s also, we're actually about to enter a 9 year, which is 2025, adds up to 9. And it's funny you say, I'll go down this little rabbit hole and then we'll circle back to you. But it's funny you say how this year you've been reading the Bible a lot more. I don't know if you've been online, you've noticed there's been a lot more religious talk. Ton. Well, the number 8, right? We're in 2024. 8 is the number of God religion. In gematria, if you take the word God, G-O-D, it equals 26. And we have 26 letters in the alphabet, right? So 2 and 6 is 8, obviously. So people who have that 8 energy are very religious. So under 8 energy, the world is going to be more religious. That's why I've noticed so many people are way more into God. I even know this entrepreneur friend of mine who started a Bible app that's like it's like ChatGPT but for Bibles.
Nice.
So you can like talk to your Bible. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it's just become more of a thing, and that makes sense because we're under 8 energy, and under 8 energy, people are going to be more religious. Now, I promise next year it's probably going to be a lot less. Probably a little bit more or less religious talk. At least you'll see online. But yeah, with the number 9, with you, I would just be very particular about who you're around. And also 9s typically are best when in like a vice president kind of situation. They're kind of better sidekicks than they are like the guy in charge, if you know what I mean.
Interesting.
So they, not in like a bad way, but in like they're very good at like kind of leading from behind, if that makes sense. Like they can be like, they can do well, but they're typically are not going to do well as like the top of the pyramid, but like right behind the top of the pyramid.
Interesting.
So yeah, 9s do well if they're on the right team. They do very well in team environments if they're on the right team. Now, if they're on a bad team, they're going to do bad. But yeah, so that's kind of a quick rundown on being born on the 18th and what that means. Did that resonate at all, or what
certainly the environment thing I've noticed like tremendously. That was something you mentioned the first time we talked on the phone, and I've been very conscious of it. I think I've been unconsciously a victim to it most of my life.
Yeah, that can happen.
But over the last probably 2 years, I've been like hyper intentional with not only where I'm putting myself, like physically on Earth, as well as like just curating kind of my lifestyle design, but also intentionally like who do I allow into my circles. And I like that you kind of like resonated with like that hermit energy for yourself, because I too very much am like introverted probably by nature. I can play the extrovert very, very well, but I do find it draining. And I have chosen to like build my circle slowly and intentionally and choose like really, really quality people one at a time, rather than like be friends with a bunch of people, because I've kind of just always known that was the wrong way, at least for myself. And in lieu, like in seasons where I don't have those people around me, I actually go to like books to like be my circle and like curate my mindset. Cause I'd much rather be in the company of, Plato and Descartes than some dude at my local
and for
gym.
Anyone listening, like who has that energy, like like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be your environment, but it's like, what are you putting in your ears? Like, what are you listening to? That's going to affect you a ton. So yeah, I mean, now we can go into your life path. So just for the audience, this is how I calculate it. So we take your birthday from left to right. So we take 4 April plus 1, which is 18th, so 1, 8. So 4 plus 1 plus 8 is 13. And then we take the year 1999, which equals 28 when you add it up. So just taking 28 plus 13, you get 41. Got it. And then you combine that number together and you get the number 5. So your 5 life path. Now fives are fun. Fives have a good time. So 5 is the number of the model. 5s tend to be very attractive. I'd say you're a decent looking guy, my friend.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
you got the beard, you can rock the beard and the shaved head. It's a vibe. Not many people can rock that. You got a tat, you're jacked. Yeah, like fives are kind of like the they rule like physical, like the physical, like very physically attractive. Women who are 5 are like models, like very beautiful. Even if in your circles of friends, if you know anyone born on the 5th, 14th, 23rd, or is a 5 life path, chances are they're pretty good looking. Even if they're not the best looking, they tend to do very well with the opposite sex. And 5 is a very sexual number, so they can tend to be, let's just say, like a little promiscuous, we could say. Yeah. 5's also the number of travel. So it makes sense that you're traveling all around the world. That's actually what you should do as a 5. Like some people with certain energies, I recommend, okay, you should probably post up somewhere that you like and do your thing. But the thing with 5s is that 5's a big number of freedom and change. The United States, founded July 4th, 1776, adds up to 5. Makes sense why the United States, its whole thing is freedom, very entrepreneurial, like very like,
individual sovereignty.
That's a big thing with people who have 5 energy, is that they are very much like, I want the freedom to do what I want. Yep. They like change. They also change their mind a lot about things. And that can be obviously a good or bad thing, but I always recommend people who I meet who are 5s to change things a lot. It's not like, they say, oh, you should stick to one thing and do it forever. One, unless you live under a rock, that's not how the world works nowadays with how fast things change. Yep. You need to be adaptable, which is another benefit of being born on the 18th, is you are very adaptable. And with the 5 traveling all the time, like I recommend you live all over the world, like especially as you get older, even with kids, like have a home in I don't know, Asia, Europe, like America, like have multiple places you can switch up your environment, because you're going to thrive from, and I bet you feel this when you arrive to a new environment, you get this like vigor of like, let's go. Like this is it. Some people like hate that. Like they hate the constant change, but people who have the 5 energy thrive under it. So, another thing with 5s is, they're pretty entertaining. The people that do the best with podcasts are typically like 3s, 5s, and 11s. 5, the word entertainment begins with E, the 5th letter, right? So 5s can be funny. They can be very entertaining, and a lot of actors can be good 5s. And Beyonce's a 5. You know, she's a performer, and obviously like
Rogan.
Rogan's an 11, or he's born on the 11th. I actually forget what Joe Rogan's life path is. I
think you mentioned when I asked that he was a 5. I don't know. I don't want to misquote him.
Yeah. Someone, dude, the amount of times
I check.
Dude, it's funny through my research. Like typically my research is just understanding this stuff and then just Googling birthdays all day. So I'll just like, as soon as I hear about something or someone, I'll like Google their birthday and I'm like, yep, makes sense. Yep, makes sense. Oh, yep, makes sense. So I've been doing that game for like 2 years at this point now, but yeah, I mean, does that make what I said sense?
100%. And I mean, it's also interesting that I'd say between the full descriptions, it weighs much more heavily on my life, i.e. like I feel that it resonates heavier. Mm-hmm. Especially with like changing the environment. I've really enjoyed kind of this sort of seasonal rotation I've started to adopt, and my plan, and I intend to carry that throughout my life, even into having kids. Like I've thought about it, like, because that's like a season of life that a lot of people cope out on. And like, or they say, because I've been traveling a lot more, they'll be like, oh yeah, do it while you're young, or like I'm like, when you don't have kids,
do it when you don't have kids. I'm like, dude, what do you mean? Like I can bring my kids. I see people travel with their kids.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Just, you can make it happen.
I think it's a program response. I think most people just, because they've not experienced it in their reality, they assume it's not possible.
Yeah, they're like, do the impossible things when you're young, or
so yeah, it's something that's a big one for me. I also think, especially now, seeing myself and acting consciously and constantly as a creative, first and foremost, like with my content and just the way I see myself as like a creative being, it makes a lot of sense with the sexual energy specifically, knowing that is kind of like the sacral, the chakra that creative energy comes from. Obviously, like over the years, I've stopped consuming pornography, which has given me a lot of surplus creative energy. And now that I actually have a creative outlet, like being able to alchemize that and transform that into a positive outlet,
amazing, bro,
has been like incredible. And certainly, like, there have been seasons where the opposite sex has been like, I guess, a recipient
I
of
bet,
that,
dude. I bet. In
that
college,
energy.
Tell me. I mean,
I don't know. I feel like it definitely, maybe like latter half of college towards graduation and after, but
yeah, five's got to be careful. You listen out there.
I fortunately, like, I know you mentioned that, like, I feel like I haven't been too much caught by the vice side of that. I feel like I've always had a decent grasp, but it is like, obviously now that I know this stuff, it's something I'm like very aware of. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I think if I didn't have a creative outlet, like if I didn't have a creative expression, it would basically be like building up water behind a dam. Like it's going to burst, whether it is through pornography or just rampant sexual outlets in an unproductive manner. Yeah,
that's definitely a way to be devolved in the 5. So like people with the 5 energy that basically get affected negatively by that energy definitely involve or indulge in a lot of hedonistic tendencies. That's like kind of one of the, like, every number has certain energies where through the positive use of it can be very, very uplifting and very, very good. And then obviously there's the polarity of it being something that can ruin you. But yeah.
No, 100%. I think it's good to point out both, because like I think one of the critiques I've heard in the past, whether it's Western astrology, numerology, or any of these kind of human design, even like
it's all positive,
right? It's just like it's vague and positive enough that everyone's like, that's awesome.
Oh yeah,
like,
that sounds so cool. See, that's another thing. When I was like learning, I was like, why aren't you telling me anything like negative? Like I want to know my flaws. Yeah. Again, know thyself. Like I should know like what I should be wary of. Like something with an 11 is very emotional. Like I was a pretty sensitive kid. Like anyone that listened and that knew me growing up, like I would get like upset and cry over forgetting my freaking pencil in like 3rd grade. Like I was like a very sensitive kid. And that's the thing with people with 11 energy is they are emotional, and if they don't learn how to control their emotions, then that can ruin them. It's, you know, I know this is going on YouTube, but like a lot of the school shooters are 11s. Like if you look, a lot of them, just look up their birthdays. A lot of them have 11 energy. Even the Trump shooter had 11 energy.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's kind of crazy. But like people, if you don't use your energies in a positive way, if you let it control you, then it won't be good.
For sure. That's super interesting. I'd love to go off air into a little bit of that, the conspiratorial side, but we'll diverge and stay on my thing. So we have Life Path 5, which is kind of like the main governing stat.
That's like your main jig.
And then the birth date number, and then from there, I suppose we have my sign and what comes with that.
Yeah, so you were born 99, which is the year of the cat. Or okay, so in the China, if you look up the calendar, there's like a rabbit, and then
I've seen both.
Yeah. So it's basically, long story short, the Vietnamese calendar has a cat, the Chinese has a rabbit. So depending on who you ask, you're a cat or a rabbit. I like to say cat because I don't like calling people rabbits. Also, like a lot of the animals, you tend to realize a lot of the traits of the animal, the person encompasses. Whereas like, what traits do rabbits have that humans have? Anyway, it's a tangent, but let's just say rabbit, cat, whatever. Basically anyone listening born in 99, 2011, 1987 would also have this energy as well. And cats are like psychologists. They are very much you could say like kind of the thinkers of the Chinese zodiac. They are very much like manipulative, I can't speak, in a sense, where they'll kind of like, you know how like cats are, like they'll kind of come around you, kind of get what they want and then dip. Sometimes they can be good at getting what they want out of people, not necessarily in like a nefarious way, but in like a sneaky kind of way, if that makes sense.
48 laws of power.
Yeah, exactly. In a way that's going to benefit them. And they're very good at playing mind games with people. They can, with someone, maybe you don't necessarily like someone, but you want to get something out of them. You can pretend to be their friend or kind of like go along with it. You're not going to necessarily come off in a way that's like they're not going to like you or something, but you can get what you want and then leave. That's kind of like how the cat likes to operate, very sneaky, like a cat would. And going back to the last time we had the year of the cat, which was 2023, that was probably, I would assume, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but pretty impactful year for you because the energy you were born with came back around. So you tell me, how was 2023 for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a year of a tremendous amount of change. That was the year that I decided to quit my full-time job and start all of this stuff. So
that was a good time to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad that I did. That was like the official leap, I suppose.
I'm curious, what like month or like around what time did you do that?
January 23.
Okay. So I want to go into this as well.
Nice.
So you, my friend, in 2022 on your birthday. So there's this thing, I mentioned it earlier on the podcast, but personal years. I think this is one of the most important things that someone who wants to understand how to use numerology in their day-to-day or their year, or they're like planning out their life, can utilize in a way. So this is it. You take your birthday, excluding the year, and you include the last time you had a birthday, and that'll tell you what personal year cycle you're in. So your most recent birthday was 4/18, which equals 13. So you can just take the number 4 and basically add it to the year. So 4 plus 8 is 12, which deducts to 3. So you've been in a 3 personal year, and I'll go into what that means in a second. But in 2022, you entered a 1 personal year. So think of it like your life is in 9-year chapters. 2022 was the beginning of a new chapter. And the beginning of 2022 before your birthday and 2021 was kind of like the end of a chapter of your life. That was probably like you were cutting certain people off in your life. You were saying goodbye.
Senior year university.
Yeah, you were saying goodbye to people like, hey, peace. Like, not in like a, asshole way, but in like a, you no longer serve me for my future way. Hope you do well. And in the 2022, when you were 23, I guess, that was like the whole new beginning. So it makes sense why in January of 2023, that all this new beginnings happen, because that's even for me. I'm currently in a 1 personal year. My life's completely different since my birthday. But the thing is, I intentionally went into this stuff knowing that I was going to plant seeds of things that I wanted to accumulate and greater years of my life in this year. So in my 9 year, I was basically doing a lot of completion energy, understanding like what I didn't want to take into my life. So I bet, like you said earlier on the pod, because I always pick up on these things, as you were saying, oh yeah, the last 2 years I've definitely changed a lot from my old me. Well, it's because you're in a whole new personal year cycle. So anyone listening, if you're either at the end or the beginning of a new energy cycle, 9 year cycle, you can basically intentionally do certain things under certain years. So going into this current year, you're in a 3 year. 3 is all about socializing. 3 is all about connections, network. It's a pretty fun year. So I bet ever since your birthday, you've been meeting way more people, way more connections, way more contacts, just meeting way more people in your life. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I fortunately was also traveling during this time.
Yeah,
living abroad
helps.
and everything. But yeah, it made a lot of different connections. Some stuff kind of obviously very synchronistically or serendipitously.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's been great. A lot of people that I'm hoping to remain friends with over the seasons, you know?
Yeah. No, yeah. So that's what the 3 years all about is socializing, meeting new people. So like my 3 years will be when I'm 28. So until then, I'm kind of in hustle mode right now, focus mode. But I know then by the time like I'm working on the project I have now, then I'll focus more back on like networking and meeting more people and all that stuff, because that's the time to do it. Now, when you were 24, you were in an 11-year cycle, which 11 years can be very emotional because, like I said earlier, 11 is an emotional number. It's also tends to be a period of your life where you have a lot of perspective shifts. So when you were 24, you probably had a lot of things in your life, perspective-wise, change. What does
For sure. Yeah. Feels like, yeah. I mean, like all of reality.
Yeah.
Pretty much
reality collapsed and you were like, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely went through like Dark Night of the Soul, like a lot of rabbit holes. It was fun. And like I've come on the other side of it with like a much more holistic understanding, but it's very safe to say that like almost nothing I used to believe, I believe now.
Yeah. I bet.
At like a very granular level. Like at a high level, I think a lot of this stuff has kind of remained the same. Like always believed in God, a God that created the universe. But once we get into the brass tacks of kind of everything else, like, it's a lot has changed. I've learned a lot and it's been fun, but I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, 100%, dude. That's what happens in 11 years is, tends to be it can be a tough year for people, depending on your life path and stuff, but typically a lot of perspective shifts. Tends to also be a very beneficial year overall, for whatever projects you're working on. Like you definitely see a lot of growth under that time. Now I will say this. So you're about to enter, when you turn 26, your birthday coming up, you're about to enter a 22 personal year.
Interesting.
So again,
so it's not like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
Well, okay. So there's Chaldean numerology. There's so many different like parts of numerology that's you can.
Sure. Yeah. Different schools.
But when the number adds up to a master number, AKA 11, 22, or 33, you don't deduct it to like a 4 or a 6. You leave it. Yeah. So, when you take 2025, which is 9, and you add it to 13, which is what that's another number, by the way, like those two numbers combined. I won't get too into it, but if I take 13 plus 9 equal 22. So in a 22 year, it's a master number, obviously. So 22 years can be very important because 22 is the number of like master builder. George Washington built America, born on the 22nd. That's an example. And under that energy is a very, very much a time to just like grind. Like 4 is the number of like hard work. 4 is the number of like discipline because of D, the 4th letter, right? So people who have 4 energy, whoever's listening to this, if you listen to your 4 life path, people with 4 energy, they're very good at doing the same thing over and over and over again, which is what is the recipe for success. So when you're in a 22 personal year, 4 year, whatever, that is the time to basically go like balls to the wall, like build. Now in the inverse, it could be a very destructive year if not used properly, right? Because the same thing where 22 is master builder, it's also master destroyer. Interestingly enough, when the Oppenheimer movie came out, I was like, I wonder what this Oppenheimer guy's birthday. I look up his birthday. He's born on the 22nd. Literally built the atomic bomb, which is the master destroyer. Destroyer of worlds was like the whole thing. Yeah. So the guy that literally built the atomic weapon, born on the 22nd, right? Master destroyer energy. Sam Altman, who's if you know who that is, OpenAI, he's born on the 22nd. He's building the largest AI company in the world. So a lot of people born on the 22nd have that energy. And when you're in a 22 personal year, that energy is with you as well. So definitely a time to put your nose to the grindstone and grind. And then right after that, when you're 27, you'll be in a 5 year, which you're a 5 life path.
Nice.
So you can imagine that would benefit. But yeah, that's, again, understanding the personal years. Think of it like each year, like your life's in 9 year long chapters, and each year has like a certain theme. And if you understand this knowledge and the energies, you understand that during certain times, that's the time to row even faster. And then there's some times where you should probably just like let the water take you where you need to go and kind of take it easy.
What's really crazy is, and I'm kind of like getting chills because like it seems that, and as I've continued to like learn more about like the non-material world, and I've just felt like I've kind of like more and more I'm walking in lockstep with God, and it just like feels my life continues to get more magical as I go. And again, like trusting my intuition more and more ahead of this. All of this is new, essentially, knowledge to myself. Ahead of this, I set an intention for every single year. Like I pick a word.
Yep.
Last year was courage. A big thing for me was like speaking my truth and just like fully embodying everything I had to say, and just like telling a whole radical amount of truth. And obviously followers of the show will kind of understand what that means, and sharing my story in the podcast and all that stuff. But this year I have been preparing for 2025, and the word that I chose is action. And I've just felt this it's the same reason I'm going to Miami. It's the same reason I'm preparing the certain things, like building out Virtus Athletica and some new brands and stuff. Like I just knew, I felt like it was going to be a building year. So it's so cool to hear that was like built in, and that I was able to essentially sense it unconsciously.
Well, that's the thing, is like people are like, oh, well, if you know about this and you know, like when years are going to be bad, is that kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy or whatever?
Yeah.
And like, I could see the argument with that, but also like you just said, it was unconsciously being happening.
Right.
That's why when I tell people, I'm like, oh yeah, so this year you were cutting off a lot of people in your life, and you like changed your environment, and now you're in like a whole new chapter. That's like one of the biggest like reactions I get is when I talk about the personal year stuff, because especially there's a huge shift from the 9 to the 1. So if I talk to someone and their 9 to 1 transition was recently, and I mentioned that, they're like, oh my God, how'd you know that? And I'm like, well, you were literally ending a chapter of your life, and now you're in like a whole new you. And it happens subconsciously. Cause that's how the energies, that's how this game is. That's the rules of the game.
Yeah.
So if you understand the rules of the game though, you can benefit. So yeah, when your birthday comes around, bro, keep networking, keep doing your thing, keep having fun. That's what 3 years are all about. But when that 22 year hits, bro, just like projects you have, just go full speed, and then take that momentum into your 5 year, because that'll benefit a lot, especially because 5, that's another time that I would definitely travel more. I would even say this year you should probably travel maybe a little bit less and just focus more on building, and then in 2026 go back to traveling to more places that you haven't been, especially in a 5 year. You want to go places you haven't been before.
Interesting.
But yeah, it makes sense that.
No, it's super cool.
That all adds up.
Touching on the precognition, cognitive bias, like self-fulfilling prophecy thing, I think it's important because a lot of like the materialist skeptic kind of point of view with any of these schools, like if they're skeptical for any reason, that's going to be a quick one to be like, well, you believe it ahead of time, so you're going to start to see it in your reality.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, synchronicity is a big one that people point out.
Or like, seeing like numbers everywhere.
Right. If you're looking for repeating numbers, you'll see them more. If you're looking for a certain color. And while that is 100% true and backed by science, I would say that it's actually telling the same story. It's just using different words. It's not that the science is disproving the spirituality or whatever school. It's that we're using and learning new language to describe what is actually happening in our material reality. Like, again, to the point I made earlier about kind of my belief, what's going on in general, we are co-creating, meaning like we are active in the experience of our own reality. And so, of course, our own consciousness and perspective on a particular issue is going to affect how your life is perceived. Like, I mean, we know so much from like studies now. Like, if you have a happy disposition, your life will be happier. If you're a pessimist, your life will be worse.
Suck, yeah.
it's not that like you literally by believing something different change your reality. And that's 100%. Why I think this stuff is really cool, because you're not giving up your power, as I think a lot of people could also argue, like, oh, this is just rules of the game. I'm permanently fated. I just might as well lie over.
Yeah,
and just
I've
die.
definitely run into situations where like I tell someone their number and they're like, that number sucks. Like I'm cooked. Like I'm like, dude, no. Every number has its its like benefits. And
what
like,
would you? Just a quick question. What would you say is like the most cooked astrology number and the most goated?
So Gary has said this a couple times. Being born on the 19th isn't necessarily ideal because the 1 to 9 energy is very like
conflicting.
Yeah. So, and that's another thing too, with like your birthday adding up to 41, for example, the vibrational energy does go through that 4 and that 1. So you have like that 4 and 1 dominate. Like a 41-5 is different than 32-5 is different than a 23-5.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's like that's more advanced stuff. But, yeah, I think being born on the 19th, I guess, depends. Like some people with one, like a big thing, people with 1 energy, like people born on the 1st, 10th, 19th, can struggle with is like alcohol, because alcohol begins with A, first letter A, right? And that can obviously get you in trouble. Addiction, again, begins with A, first vowel. So like a lot of people with that 1 energy have addiction problems, alcohol, stuff like that. So that can definitely be bad. But 1s typically are also very good like leaders, and like they're the kind of like, again, like the number 1, they're ahead of things, so they have a lot of benefits as well. In terms of a life path that's like the most cooked, so in the particular, the one I'm talking about is my buddy who's a 4 life path. And 4s are kind of like the worker bees, I guess, because the thing with a 4 is like if you're a 4, you have to work hard. Like some people get lucky breaks, 4s don't. They have to put in the work.
Interesting.
But if you put in the work, you're basically like guaranteed success. So like Bernard Arnault is, one of the richest men in the world. He's a 4 life path. Bill Gates is a 4 life path. A lot of very successful people are 4 life paths because they put in the work. So they're not going to get they're not going to win the lottery. They're not going to get like an easy break in life. But he was basically like, bro, I'm just like a slave. I got to work, like all this stuff. But I was like, no. If you work, you're going to succeed. Some people will work their entire life and see 0 success. That's just the reality. But people with the 4, like who are 4s, they tend to do very well. They just have to work for it. Some other numbers are luckier. So like 3s are very lucky. Like people with 3 energy, they just get lucky breaks. That's just how it is. And I would say, thinking to the other numbers, I mean, if you listen to any of like GG33, like Gary stuff, he shits on like the 9 life path a lot. Just because, again, going back to that environment thing, 9s can be like shitty because environment plays a huge role. So people with the 9 energy, they just need to be careful about who they're around. And they're sometimes harder to give readings to. Like I've found out it's sometimes tough to like talk to a 9 life path about everything because how they grew up and who they were around dictates a lot of like how they are as a person. So that matters like a ton even more. But I wouldn't say there's necessarily like a really bad life path. Now there are some life paths that are like pretty like OP. I'd say like
the master numbers.
Master numbers are pretty OP, but they have a lot of challenges in life. Like they're not. So a lot of people who are like master numbers, they're like old souls basically. Think of like, again, just take these ideas and just hypothetically, I guess, just think of it like from this perspective. Life is like a video game. We live in this like reality, whatever. And each number, each reincarnation, if you believe in that, some people don't, some people, whatever. Let's just say reincarnation is real. Basically, how your soul does in this lifetime determines on what mission you have in the next lifetime. People who are master numbers have basically been reincarnated a ton. So if you talk to a lot of people who are master numbers and you say, like, for example, this one girl, I was like, you're an 11, so you're an old soul. That's like one of the things. She was like, oh my God, I've been called that my entire life, like all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, well, because literally your soul's been through its mission many, 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 many times. And now here you are. So that comes with a lot of burdens, like karmically, right? And whether used for good or bad, that can lead to bad things. So like I was saying earlier, a lot of 11s can suffer, but then also a lot of 11s tend to do very well in society. For example, Tony Robbins is an 11, Grant Cardone's an 11, Gary Vee's an 11. These are just some entrepreneurial people, but Obama was an 11, Ronald Reagan was an 11, Joe Rogan born on the 11th. A lot of people that kind of have run the show for a while are 11s, or even like politician wise. the powers that be, whatever you want to say, like they'll purposely pick 11s because they understand 11s have that charisma. They have like a lot of energies that people are are going to follow. A lot of cult leaders are 11. Even Arlen's an 11. He had tribe, like, right? He was kind of like he had his own little like cult, basically, if you want to call it that. But that's what a lot of 11s are good at. So in going into 33s, so it's funny, we were earlier with my mom, and she's a 33, and she's always, it's been interesting because she's like been different. Like I've just noticed she's just different than other moms, I guess. She's always like, when we were living in a small town, people wanted her to run for mayor because she was like kind of a big influence around. She's done like well for herself. And she's always had this like presence of like authority, which has been interesting to see, especially when I started learning about this stuff. But if you look in history, a lot of people who are 33 life paths have influence, or they've changed the world in some sense. So for example, Albert Einstein, he's a 33 life path. Thomas Edison, electricity, he's a 33 life path. The guy, I forget his name, but he invented the internet. He's a 33 life path. For any of my gaming nerds out there, the guy that invented Minecraft, the biggest video game of all time, is a 33 life path. Even the guy that invented the bench press is a 33 life path. Like,
interesting.
Yeah. And Wilbur Wright, he invented flight, right? Yeah. 33 life paths. So master numbers definitely have the ability to change the world in a sense.
Is it also with like kind of that inventor bent? Like it seems like a lot of people you described there like invented or created something.
So they're like trailblazers, right? Like they kind of can curate things and ideas or have a lot of influence. Not to get too down the rabbit hole, but like Travis Kelce, he's a 33 life path, and you know he's a big guy with a certain pharmaceutical company, I'll say.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got influence, right?
Sure.
He's definitely got influence. If you have a sister, or I have a sister, she didn't care about football at all until Travis Kelce.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
But anyway, so people with certain energies have, I would say, benefits. Threes are also very, let's just say we live in the third dimension, and that's a benefit if you're a 3 life path. Dustin is a 3.
Cool.
He actually didn't know about this stuff when we talked.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's read billions of books probably.
Yeah.
I went
to meet him.
I went to Egypt with him and Will. It was super
I
cool.
want to ask about that probably off air, but
yeah.
Really, really interesting stuff. I guess you've kind of like loosely alluded to like that's high level, or that I'll just leave it there. And even at the beginning, you were saying like there's certain things that Gary, as well as other practitioners, you know, like you studied under him, but there's plenty of people out there that are like deeply knowledgeable. We'll call them like wizards. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, based on what you know, and then based on what you can kind of conjecture that's behind walls that you don't even know about. Why is it that some of this stuff is so intensely gatekept? Mm-hmm. And do you think I'll leave it with that question initially.
Yeah. So I think knowledge is powerful. So typically, I mean, why do people gatekeep information behind a course or this or that, right? Or gatekeep anything behind a paywall? It's because knowledge is powerful, and we live in a capitalistic society, and people want to make money off of that. So I think that's part of it. Also, I mean, it's powerful information. I mean, the reason why I'm earlier was saying how I didn't want to go into certain things was because basically I signed like certain things to where I wasn't going to disclose, like an NDA. Yeah. So I'm not going to like come out here and say stuff that I learned through an NDA, just because. But yeah, I'd say that, I guess.
Can you speak broadly, and you can choose not to answer this, but Gary gets a lot of interesting attention, like, and like a fair amount of flack, and he just based on my perception of him, never spoken to him, never met him, but like I get conflicting energy, to say the least. Like I personally don't see him as someone I would trust. Mm-hmm. Having based on your interactions with him, and like also again with the whole karma thing, like it seems like a lot of bad shit happens to him, or like negative attention is at least directed at him. Mm-hmm. What do you think that is about? One
of it is virality. Like the way you become viral is by being controversial. That's what, again, Andrew Tate, born in 1986, the year of the tiger, became the most controversial, famous human being on earth in 2022, the year of the tiger, right? So again, going from the energy, but going back to Gary, I mean, he definitely like again before he started like going crazy on like TikTok and Instagram with all these going on a bunch of podcasts and like getting all these clips and stuff. He was definitely a lot smaller. He's definitely very aggressive on Twitter sometimes if you like read his tweets. Yeah, I mean that's like how he is karmically. I mean he definitely has a bit of an ego, but that's fine. He's a 33 life path as well, so like he definitely
can get away with it.
I mean, I guess, you know, I think I talked to him for a while on the phone. I have his number, and from what I got from him, this was before he started going, you know, big on social media, and we talked, is that he's a genuinely good person that wants the best. I mean, he promotes a lot of the things. If you kind of get away from the short form brain rot, just like attention grabbing view stuff, if you listen to a lot of his long form content, pre-short form, you know, everything, he's very, very open about being pro nuclear family, like pro, like like he's not about the red pill stuff. Like he's not about like, oh, sleep with a bunch of girls. He's all about get a wife, have kids. He's very like pro, like business and like just making it yourself. He hates the whole like weird, simp culture, I guess you could want to call it, OnlyFans stuff. He's always like talking negatively about that stuff, which you could argue is like that's a very good message to be putting out into the world. Now I think that a lot of that stuff might not go viral, so you know, he says very controversial things about women sometimes with like certain opinions about, you know, whatever, but I think a lot of that is just getting viral, and then he believes it, and he doesn't give a fuck. I mean, he's worth a lot of money. He's got his wife. He's got 2 kids. He's doing his thing. He wants to be famous. I mean, he's going to be even more famous. I can say now, this is end of 2024. Next year, he's a snake. We're entering the year of the snake next year. He's also entering an 8 personal year, which under 8 energy, you typically tend to make more money, also more power, more of an influence in that energy. So I could see him blowing up even more than he is now next year. But yeah, I mean, I can definitely see where people are coming from in terms of like his content leaving a bad taste in your mouth. I always say this with anything. No matter who it is, listen to them in a long format and make your opinion then, because we live in such a world where everything's cut up, everything's short form, everything's quick seconds. You can form opinions of people through like 60 seconds, even 20 people. The attention spans can't even get past 15 seconds. But, you know, and that's the way, if you know anything about marketing and social media, you want to have the most controversial hook at the beginning to get the views, right? If you're optimizing for the algorithm. So it makes sense why people can be turned off by anyone who's hacking the game or the algorithm in that way. But so I would just recommend, like, just listen. There's one podcast he did with Hotep Jesus is his name. It's from 2020. Everyone that didn't like Gary that I've shown that podcast to is like, okay, I see where this, because he was a lot more calm, cool, and collective in that. He was, I mean, 2020 short form definitely wasn't what it is now. And he was definitely more digestible, I guess. And I'd recommend anyone listening to who wants to hear more from him, just go to that. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely like, I mean, he'll say it himself. He's cocky. He's like, I'm the godfather of modern numerology, basically, which in a sense, I mean, that's who I learned it from. Right. So I'm not going to say here and say I unlocked the secrets of the world. No, I mean, I literally saw some of his tweets. I was like, this guy seems legit. He actually posted a video today of a clip from him from 2011 talking about numerology. I mean, he's been doing this for 20 years. Yeah. So he's been in the game for a while. It's just now he's like hacking the algorithm of social media, and he's blown up. And I can definitely see why people are turned off by the way he can come across in short form. But he's a good person. From what the time I talked to him, I plan on hitting him up and like he's doing a couple in-person meetups for his group next year that I'm going to go to. And yeah, I think overall he's spreading a positive message. I think this information is very, very powerful and very like good to know. Again, know thyself. Every person I've helped with understanding themselves more through this, they've used it in a beneficial manner. So I think it's like an overall net positive. But he definitely he can definitely come across the wrong way. Yeah.
Well, it was a very political answer. I appreciate that, and I think I'll definitely check out the podcast you mentioned. And I can see it like from a high level. Like, I think the important thing, it's kind of the same thing with the religiosity, calcification of the mind. Like, don't deify people. Like, don't put all your stock in just some human being, even if they're very knowledgeable. It's something I've like learned through the podcast. You know, you put these people on, even if you don't intend to, you like in your
on
head,
a pedestal.
like even if it's not a pedestal, you kind of like caricaturize them in their head. It's like they represent the things that they put online, but then you meet them and it's like, this is just some 26-year-old person.
Yeah. It's just
like a dude.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, like, and Gary, one of those examples, right? He's just a dad. He's just a dad out
He's just
there
a dad. He's got a 12-year-old.
He's just hanging out.
He's got a wife. He's, you know, and he was just basically doing his numerology. I mean, there's clips from him talking in conference rooms from like 2014 of like talking about numerology with people, like doing his thing. And he, he's definitely a character. Like, I'm not going to say like, I understand why people like are turned off by him, but I learned on, you know, what I know from him. So I'm going to pay homage to that. And
for sure,
you know, he's definitely can say some things and I'm like, okay, you're not winning over people, dude. But that's anyone. I mean, I can, again, going back to the thesis, antithesis, synthesis, take someone's ideas, you can then synthesize it into your own worldview or viewpoint. But yeah.
You mentioned before, like, you've seen people have measurable improvement in their life. You've seen improvement in your life. Like, a good thing or something I'm curious about, like, there's been times where I've reached out to you and you're like, hey, can we do it on X date, like next week?
Yeah.
It's like a better energy, for instance.
Yeah.
So to what degree do you think like the average listener or even myself, like, would benefit getting super granular, as in like days and the energy of the day of the month, and then also maybe even time of day?
Yeah.
Like, because obviously numbers are deeply coded into our experience, so it could get pretty schizo pretty quickly. Like, repetitions of a certain action. Like, I'm sure it gets pretty deep. Where do you think like the highest ROI
for sure
lands?
So there's definitely people, and I wouldn't say I fall into this category, that like, I mean, it's like every hour of the day, minute, like day, like very optimized for the energies, which I don't know, I guess you could call it laziness, or you could just call it like, I think there are certain days that you can do big things. Like, I'm all about like the big, I forget where I heard this from, but to succeed in life, all you really need to do is like 1 to 2 good decisions a day. So whatever those decisions are, there are definitely days that you can benefit from. So let me give you an example. So for money, if you want your business to do well, a lot of people want money and success. 8 is a money number. That's why a lot of people this year have either they've made a bunch of money or they're broke, right? That's kind of like the theme of the year, is like either your finances have gone up or they've gone down or they've been all over the place. So on an 8 day, so like on the 8th, 26th, 17th, that's a good day to incorporate a business, open an LLC, launch a product, pricing things in 8s as well. So like if you have a product, like let's say I were to sell someone a numerology reading, I'd probably price it to be like $44 for like 45 minutes or whatever. Or $800. Or if you go to Walmart now, they have like the 8s all over. Like there's a lot of 8. It used to be 9.
Yeah.
Well, and another number that has to do with money is 28. So 28 is actually the wealth number. So 8 is money, 28 is right there. The 2 amplifies the 8. But basically, a lot of people with wealth energy, or like 8's money, 28's like a whole nother level, have 28 energy. For example, Elon Musk, born on the 28th. Bill Gates, like I said earlier, he's born on the 28th. The Dallas Cowboys, they're like the richest franchise in the world. They're founded on the 28th. Vanguard. Nice. This is all stuff like Gary talks about this a lot.
Yeah.
It's out there. You can just like do your own homework, but those are good days to, if anything monetarily, if you want to open a business, even getting married. Vladimir Putin, he got married on the 28th. His first daughter is born on the 28th. I mean, come on. Like when you start to realize that, going back to the people in positions of power, when they start utilizing this stuff and you see that, it doesn't matter what you believe or what I believe. What are they doing and how are they using it? You can learn from that, and you can use it, obviously not for nefarious things, but you can use it in a benefit way. But I'll just go through the numbers. So like 1, that's like beginnings. So a good time to start something is on the 1st. Why do you think everyone gets this like big energy to start something on the 1st of every month? Because that's what the energy is. It's like 1 is like new beginnings, start, everything like that. So if you want to start a new habit, if you want to start a new venture, a new relationship, that's a good day to do it. 2 is a good, so the only true pure 2 energy is the second. 20, it's like another thing, but 2 is like a very diplomatic number. So that's a good day to make peace with someone. 2 is a very peaceful, like sensitive number. So if you want to make peace with someone, you can do it on the 2nd. 3 is like a fun day. So if you want to like throw a party or something, you can do it on like the 3rd, 12th, 20th, 21st. 4 is a day to work. You don't want to you want to work on the 4 day, or the 4th or, 13th. 5, travel. So like, book a flight, plan travel, do something, maybe have sex. 5 is a good day to do that. 6 is the number of home and family. So the 6th is a good day to be at home, spend time with family. Under 6 energy, that's like a good time. Like if you're in a 6 personal year, that's like a good time to maybe have a kid or like, take on more responsibility. 6 is like thrive with responsibility. 7, again, 7's like loner energy. So 7's like a good time to like be alone. 7 also can be injury prone. So like maybe not the best day to like exercise. So like Gary, for example, he's in a 7 personal year, he tore his ACL. And a lot of people I've noticed, anyone listening who follows like American football or just sports in general, 2023, it was like kind of known as being a big year for injuries.
So many actually.
Yeah, well, 2023 is a 7 year. So under 7 energy, people are going to get injured more. I don't know about you, but I noticed so many people in 2023 with boots, casts, like their arms in a sling, all this stuff. And I was laughing because I was just like, yeah, that makes sense. We're in a 7 year. So yeah, when you're in a 7 personal year, not the time to like hit new PRs in the gym. You want to just like, do your thing, take it easy. 8, like I said, is money. And then 9 is completions. So you don't want to start anything under 9 energy because it won't last. So if you're in a 9 personal year and you're thinking about starting that new business, just wait. Like I was in my 9 year, had all these ideas of like, oh, I want to do this, but I waited and it ended up working out well. So, and because timing's everything. So like when you time to do certain things is important. So if it's the 11th, it's funny. So the 11th is interesting. So obviously there's 9/11, right? There's a lot of 11s around, like Gary talks about this a lot, but there's a lot of 11s around that day. So like flight 11 was like the first plane.
2 towers. 2
towers look like an 11, 110 stories, New York City, 11 state, all that stuff. 11's not a good day to fly because 11 and let's just say it's very it's very powerful energy. Yesterday was the 29th, 2 9's 11. There were 3 plane crashes in the world yesterday, and one in South Korea that killed like 170 people. And the flight number also added up to 11, which was interesting. So that's one way you can avoid certain things. Like I don't fly on the 11th personally. Is that schizo? Yeah, you can call it schizo. I don't care, but that's just me. 22. So if it's the 22nd, that's a good time to like build. So yeah, I mean those now 33 days are rare, especially now ever since the year 2000, just because most dates don't add up to 33 because when we were in the 1900s, a lot more, there's a 9, those numbers tend to add up to 33. So 33 is actually a lot more rare now. Like there's like 2 days this year that adds up to 33.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So, we were originally going to do this podcast on the 22nd, but it ended up just not working out, which is fine. But that day adds up to 33, which is 12/22, 2024. So 33 days, that's a good day to start a social media account because, again, influence. So if you want to start a YouTube, Instagram, whatever, that's a good day to do it. Yeah.
Interesting. So you would say that there's benefit at least to the days of the month.
Yeah, certain days for sure. Now, do I say I'm going to sit here and like say I live by it? No. There's certain days where I'm like, I just don't think of it. Sure. But there's definitely some days where if I'm like thinking of starting something and it's like the 9th, I'm like, oh, I'll just wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. And if something's like something big, like for example, like for one of the projects I'm working on, I bought all the domains. I set up all the accounts. I set up all that stuff on the 22nd of this month because it has 33 energy and I want the business to do well. So I did all of that work, setting up the foundation and the infrastructure of the business on that day, purposely.
Nice.
So like big stuff like that, then yeah, I'll do it.
And this is something we haven't talked on this podcast, but we did talk on that first call with signs. So I'm a cat, right?
Yeah.
On the opposite side of the wheel is my enemy sign.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking like what you're describing, like there's kind of the micro planning of like, how am I going to spend my day, my week, my month. There's like the macro, what is my year, what is my personal year cycle, and then also what is the sign of the year. Pairing with that, like huge decisions, i.e. marriage, children, etc.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You've also alluded to the fact that having relationships with your friend signs and enemy signs is something to be conscious of. So lay out
how that works,
what those are, and what they would be for me.
Glad you brought that up, because there's so much that
I know.
Everything could be talked about. But like you said, relationships. Another thing I want to mention is a bad day to get married or start a relationship is a 7, because 7's loner energy. So yeah, don't get married. If you start a relationship in your 7 personal year cycle, it won't work. Trust me, I've been there and done that. Okay. And anyway, but yeah, so you're born 1999, the year of the cat. So you have an enemy sign. So one enemy, and you have 2 like friends or like homies. So your enemy is the rooster.
Yeah.
So under rooster energy, not a good time to do big things. Now, what's crazy is if you look at this American schooling system, when do we typically start our schooling? Around the age of 6, right? 5, 6 in kindergarten. So let's just use me for example. I was born in 1998. I went to kindergarten in 2004. 2004 is the year of the monkey. That's my enemy sign. Right. And when did I graduate? I graduated in 2016, which is the year of the monkey, my enemy sign. So I started and ended my schooling under enemy energy. And so do majority of Americans, is they literally make the biggest decision of their life, aka where they go to school, their career, all this stuff, in their enemy energy, which is like setting people up for failure. So if you ask me, that was done on purpose, but I digress.
I agree.
I think that was done on purpose. Yeah. But anyway, so basically when you're born every 6 years, so like when you're 6, when you're 18, when you're 30, and so on and so forth, you'll be under enemy energy. And that's the time to just basically lay low, take it easy. Now you have 2 friend signs. So those are also 2 years that you benefit from. So for you, you're a cat. So your 2 friend signs are the goat and the pig. So in a goat year and a pig year, that is also a time that the energies are like benefiting you. So for example, I'll just go through all the animals real quick, just to kind of lay the land. So there's 12 animals. It starts with the rat, and then the ox, and then the tiger, and then the cat, and then the dragon, which is the year we're in now. And then next year is the snake year. After that is the horse, and then the goat. So that'll be 2027. So that'll be a good year for you. And then 2028 is the monkey. 2029 is the rooster. So that is a year for you to just like chill, take it easy. Basically, you don't want anything big like moving, buying a house, having a relationship, married, kids,
business.
That's the time to just like not start any of that. You can still operate your stuff, but maybe not the best time to scale. Yeah. You know? Yep. And then 2030 is the dog, and then 2031 is the pig, and then we start back. 2032 will be the rat. So under rat years, typically it's like a big new beginning. So if we think back to the last 2 rat years we had 2020. I would say anyone who's an adult realizes how big that year was. And 2008, which what else happened in 2008? Yeah. That was a big deal. We were kids, but still huge deal, obviously. So the world goes in 12-year cycles as well. But with you, the last, like, besides the cat year in 2023, the last year that you would have been under beneficial energy would have been 2019, which was the year of the pig. So if you think back, 2019 was probably a year. Now, if your personal year cycle you were in a 6 personal year, so probably taking on a little bit more responsibility in life, maybe a little bit more time with family that year. But yeah, 2019 was the year of the pig, and then 2027 is the goat year. Now with relationships, I always recommend. I've seen it myself. I'm blessed. I think one of the biggest privileges you can have are just parents that are still together. And both of my parents, my mom is a monkey, my dad is a rat, and they're in the same triad, which monkey, rat, dragon, that's a triad. Tiger, horse, dog, that's a triad. We already said cat, goat, pig is a triad for you, and then the last one is the snake, rooster, and ox. So if you stick to your energies, that in terms of marriage, Business is different because like typically businesses these days aren't lasting like 20 years. Like typically go into business with someone, print a bag, and then do something else. So
Sure.
it's like how a lot of businesses nowadays. Business partners though, I mean, very good. Friends, you typically tend to find that you do well with people your age. Now, what's funny is roosters actually don't do too well with roosters. So if you think about it, you put two roosters in a cage, what are they going to do? They're going to fight. So I gave a reading to my homie who's a rooster, and I was like, hey, so like growing up, did your whole class like kind of just like fight and everyone was mad at each other? And he was like, yeah, dude, like we were just like known as that class that like everyone, there was always fights, there was always this. I'm like, yeah, well, you put a bunch of roosters in a classroom together, they're gonna do that. So but yeah, I always recommend when it comes to who you decide to date, marry, everything, that you marry the sign. And it's crazy, even before I knew this stuff, I'm the youngest of 3. All my siblings are married, and they're all with compatible signs. And
they didn't
go they didn't know any of this. I introduced all this stuff to my whole family, but they didn't know any of this. And they've all been together. They've and I don't see them ever divorcing. Like their relationships, for the most part, from what I see, obviously people are secret and private, but I think it works out. And then, certain signs do well with each other. So for example, I'm a tiger. Tigers do very well with tigers. Tigers are actually interesting because they typically aren't the best when it comes to monogamy. They typically like the hunt, right? But
sure.
But when they get their kill, they're kind of like looking elsewhere. But tigers get along best with tigers. Most tigers I know are actually single, except for the ones, every single tiger I know that's in a long-term relationship is dating a tiger.
Interesting.
I went camping recently, and a guy I met there was a tiger, and I was like, yo, tiger, what's up? That's my people. And he was telling me about his girl, and he was like, dude, I've never really been the guy to settle down, but like this girl, dude, she's like special and like all this stuff. And I was just like smirking. I was like, dude, this girl's a tiger. And then like a couple days into the camping trip, I was just like, hey, what's your girlfriend's birthday? And then he gives it to me, and I'm like, yeah, she's a tiger, just like you. And he was like, what does that mean? And I was like, dude, tigers get along. I was worried for a second. I was like,
yeah.
Oh, but when he told me that, it just proves. And the thing too, over the last 2 years, I've been knowing this stuff. I've just done the groundwork of homework of literally asking pretty much every single person I come in contact with their birthday, to where I've just seen it work. Every relationship I've seen that crushes, they're compatible energies. And I'm like, okay. And then relationships I've seen, like this guy that used to work for me, he was like in his 30s, and he was like complaining to me about his girl. And he's like, oh dude, like I was like staying with her, and she like kicked me out, and she's like yelling at me in front of her kid. I was like, he was dating a single mom. I was like, all right, whatever. But he was like complaining to me about this, and I was like, well, what's her birthday? And they were enemy signs. And I was like,
wow.
I'm like, brother, I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, so I'm just like, okay, well, that's the first problem is your
you would say like triad is good. Other signs outside of the triad are neutral-ish.
Yes, and neutral.
Then
enemy signs stay clear. No-go. Especially you as a cat. The cat rooster energy is very like bad.
Contentious.
Yeah. Well, think about it like cock.
Right.
Right.
Sure. Okay.
It's just
nice.
Right? But yeah, so that's, if you understand this stuff, you can dodge a lot of landmines. And what's interesting is usually the universe will mess with you, and you'll be more attracted to like your enemy sign.
Yeah, there's like a little bit of that shadow.
Yeah. Even like countries have certain energies that, like the United States is a monkey country. I'm a tiger. That's my enemy sign. Maybe long term I shouldn't be in America. There's certain people that won't even come to America. Like Andrew Tate's a tiger. He won't even come to America. Well, legally, whatever.
Sure.
But also, if you're a monkey, so if you're born in 2004 or 1980 or 1992, America is an amazing place for you to be because it's a monkey country. So this even goes into like places you should live. So yeah, it's definitely good to know your energies and kind of what benefits, like what other energies are compatible with you. I'd say it's one of the more powerful things you can utilize it for. Another thing too, if you're born around January, February, you got to like Google like when the Chinese calendar falls, because typically it's around late Jan, early Feb. So you might be born 1999, which is a cat year, but if you're born like January 10th, you would technically still be a tiger because the Chinese New Year didn't change. So that's one thing for people listening if they're born around that time.
I mean, it feels like we could go on and on and on.
I mean, dude, I could talk about this.
And I mean, I intend to continue the dialogue because I'm like so
yeah,
insatiably curious. But this has been really, really interesting. I want to like be respectful to the listeners. I think we're probably around hour 10 mark. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing your knowledge. There's so much more to go into, which obviously people can reach out to you directly. But I do have 3 closer questions that I ask every guest.
Let's do it
on the podcast.
Let's do it.
The first is, if you can go back to a younger version of yourself and tell him one thing, what would that be?
Stay away from drugs. I had a drug problem for a while, and I'll be open about it. When I was 17 or 15, I like smoked weed for the first time, and it took away like probably a decade of my life. Just
damn.
Yeah, I would say that. Like I haven't smoked in my 9 year. Again, going back to completions, that was like a big theme of my year, was basically leaving vices and all that stuff out. So I don't drink, I don't smoke. I'll drink occasionally. I never really had an alcohol problem, but I would tell that 15-year-old to stay away from that, because now people say, "Oh, I'm creative." This, okay, whatever, but that's fine. If you can function on it, great. Albeit to you, but I can tell you, you're not your full potential doing it. You're not, and I can even tell. Like when I did 100 days of, it was my first time going sober from anything for more than like 2 weeks. This was like beginning of 2023. It was still Tiger year, right? So it was a good time to make this shift, right? But me and my really good friend, shout out Garen Terrell, we did 100 days, just nothing. And after day like 90, I could really tell like I was just different. I spoke differently, like a lot less ums and ahs, and I don't know, it was just, I sounded different. What really hit it home was I was on the phone with like an old friend that I used to work with, and we were just catching up, and I was telling him like, yeah, dude, I'm like 90 days into nothing. And he's like, dude, I can tell you're like, you sound like a completely different human. And I'm like, great. That's amazing to hear. So yeah, that's what I would say. Also, now I'll just stick it with that, because that probably, did it lead to me having like a fun social life, I guess? Yeah. But, I think it did more harm than good, personally.
That's good. Secondly, what is one quote that's always stuck with you or that you try to live by?
There's a lot. Let me think. I feel like I'm going to butcher it. I'm trying to think of like a good one. You maybe can cut like a little bit of the thing.
No worries.
Let's see, a quote that I live by. I think I said it earlier, but the idea of, I guess, I want to say the actual quote. Could we pause real quick and I can like look up the quote and say it?
Well, your phone is,
I guess we can look on our computer. I'm trying to think. That's a really good question. A quote I try to live by.
Even if you know the attribution and
of like what the quotes,
butcher it, people can look it up and I can put it on screen.
Yeah. I'm trying to pull something from like meditations or something. There's something from meditations that talks about like, don't you see, it's like, don't you see the bees? Don't you see the ants going on about their day? Don't you as a human see that like life is worth living as well? Like life is basically working hard. That's like not really a quote. It's more just like a part of that book. You stump me. I'm like, I'm trying to pull something from my.
Part of like no preparation with the question too is that like, I think if it is truly one that's like really deep in there or like something that's like emblematic, it's not always going to be like the coolest one or one that like really hits.
Well, the one,
just something that like, what comes to top of mind?
The top of mind now that you say that, and thank you for that assistance, because I was trying to think of some like long quote, but it's know thyself, because that is so. If you know thyself, and this kind of goes back to everything we've been talking about on the podcast. If you understand your pros, your cons, who you do well with, like what even like route of life you should go down based off of just knowing thyself, you can truly like optimize. Because so many people try to, I guess, fix their weaknesses when it's like, okay, that's your weakness. Just like, there's certain weaknesses that are good to fix, right? But leaning into your strengths and knowing thyself is super, super important. So I would say that one came top to mind. I appreciate it. I was like going dead for a second.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. I love it. And
because I use that one a lot. Like when I explain this stuff to people, I'm like, know thyself. I'm like, if you understand, like if you do the inner work and you figure out who you are and how you resonate best, then that's going to help you a ton in life. So I'd say that.
I love it. And then finally, what do you believe is your unique gift to give the world?
I'll go off of like what people have said recently. Like I went on that camping trip. It was more of a retreat. Shout out Leo Stodgy. He hosts like a group in Austin, Texas called Reveal. It's really good. I love what they do. They have these kind of questions, but in a group setting. Over a dinner, we had it around a campfire. And one of the things that people were saying to me, these strangers that I met, is like they said that I had a really good gift at articulating ideas to people. So I'd say that maybe I've met a lot of different types of people, and I've always been someone to try to like take what I can out of people and not necessarily like cast judgment of like anyone particularly. And just, again, it's like that idea of synthesizing every piece of information that you can into your own worldview. And I'd say I've done a decent job at that, especially as I've gotten older. But ask the question again, and then I'll give like a one answer.
What do you believe is your unique gift to give the world?
I would say, I would just say like knowledge. Like I love like learning and then like giving that to people, even when it comes to the content side of things. And this is actually something that Gary told me on when we talked on the phone, because he was telling me like, dude, you need to be a teacher of some kind. Mm-hmm. Like one of the things I loved when I was running my sales teams was just training guys.
Yeah.
Like I love learning, and I love taking that knowledge and making it in a digestible way for someone to understand, take in, and then take with them. So yeah, I'd say that. Yeah.
I love it. Well, Chris, this has been great. Appreciate anyone that's made it this far.
Yeah, shout out.
Made it this far. Where can people find more of you, and what are you working on that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I showed you earlier, working on business side of things. I kind of want to keep it, low for now, just because dopamine from telling people your goals, stuff like that. But I'm really excited about the potential with that. I have a YouTube channel, Chris Sutter, if you look it up. And then my Instagram is Chris Sutter with 3 T's.
Nice. So all your stuff will be linked below. Obviously, if you found this podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you can continue to listen there. Please subscribe to the YouTube for everything going on, including the behind the scenes vlogs of everything that I'm building here. Top link in the description will be the newsletter. That's kind of the bleeding edge of like updates and everything going on in the Vitruvian universe, as well as upcoming launches in 2025, which is exciting, and I can't wait to share with you guys. But thank you for spending your most valuable resource, your attention, with myself and Chris today. Memento Mori, and be the Renaissance.
Let's go, dude. Let's go.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.